When you're talking about that many pieces of combat equipment, that is the equivalent of 2 armored divisions of equipment coming as gifts from allied nations. And it's a pretty big ask, not only from the standpoint of resources, but the question might be, General Zalewski, where do you think these are going to come from? There isn't a big store somewhere where you just pull out 300 tanks, 600 infantry fighting vehicles, and in addition to that, have your soldiers trained on them by February 23rd, and have the support infrastructure and resupply capabilities to literally provide a logistics supply chain trail for that. So it is a big ask, and it almost is beyond the pale that General Zalewski would say something like that, because it is quite a bit of equipment. What you're asking for is really contributions to a defense force. But not only that, there is the requirement, especially for these frontline vehicles that are Western technology, to train Ukrainian soldiers on the capabilities of these vehicles. As we're seeing now, after the United States said that they would offer Patriot missiles, and the expectation is that these weapon systems that are literally worth billions of dollars will suddenly appear and be capable of countering a Russian threat. Now that we're training Ukrainian soldiers at Fort Sill, Oklahoma, there's the realization that yes, this takes a long time. These are not something you just put a soldier in and say point and shoot. Well, when you're talking about 14 Challenger tanks from the UK, again, I'm going to suggest people take an appetite suppressant and understand what this means. 14 tanks is a tank company. It has about 90 people in it. What General Zalewski and the Ukrainians are looking for are multiple tank divisions of 300, 600 vehicles, as the general said in December. That takes a long time. And even with 14 Challenger tanks, it's going to take a significant requirement to train Ukrainian soldiers on that very modern, technologically advanced weapon system that the UK is giving, that's very different from the T-72s that they've been fighting on. And in addition to that, they have to have the repair parts, the capability to conduct the repair and resupply these vehicles with ammunition. So again, you won't see, the UK may be giving these 14 tanks to Ukraine, but you will not see them on the battlefield within days. It will probably be within weeks. Just like the 50 Bradley systems that the United States are giving the Ukrainians, they are now beginning the training on those vehicles at Grafenwehr and Hohenfels training area in Germany, a place where I know very well. So it will take a long time to get the familiarization and the crew training before those pieces of equipment can be found on the battlefield. Well, if you look at the map that you have up now, you'll see that there's a river right next to that town of Kherson. That's the Dnieper. Russian forces have gone over that river for the last couple of weeks. I've been watching this particular fight. They didn't launch the counteroffensive today. It's been going on for a while. And in fact, there's an estimated between 5,000 and 15,000 Russian forces on the western bank of that Dnieper River. If Ukraine can continue to stop the escape of those soldiers, there could be a very big capture, bagging a very large Russian force. They have been executing very good operations to try and force the Russians into a beachhead, if you will, along the western bank of the Dnieper. And if they can get them so they can't escape, there will be a very decisive battle at that site. Kherson is important because it is one of the provinces that has a direct connection to that province to the south, that autonomous region of Crimea. And it controls Russian logistics forces coming in and out of that autonomous region because Russia has a military base and a couple of a naval base and a couple of air bases on Crimea. Ukraine has generated a momentum over the last several weeks. Their forces are moving extremely well. The Russian forces are on their back feet. They're trying to get more mobilized forces into their formations, the Russians are, and they have been incredibly unsuccessful in doing so. There's been a recruitment drive, if you want to call it that, within Russia to get close to 200,000. Putin says that there are 16,000 new soldiers at the front. I find that hard to believe, and even if there are, those are untrained forces being funneled into units that have already suffered dramatically over the last couple of months and that are under the constant guns of the Ukrainian force. I got bad news for Mr. Putin. I think his mobilization drive ended several weeks ago. They are having some real challenges getting forces to the front across the board. You just reported on the fact that there was a fratricide, a major fratricide by soldiers against other Russian soldiers in that force, in that training area near Belgorod. When you have that kind of a fratricide, estimated 15 soldiers killed by what is reported as 2 Tajiki soldiers that were in that camp, that creates some real problems within morale of the force. As if Russia didn't have enough morale problems, this is going to generate more because they don't know who to trust and they're not getting the right kind of recruits. Mr. Putin also said yesterday that he's made some major mistakes in terms of recruiting forces. He's recruited married men, older men, men with health problems. Well, gee whiz, that kind of hits the big three. And when you're talking about getting a lot of forces to the battlefield, I'm telling you, it is not going to work out well for Mr. Putin or the Russian force.
President Zelensky is a leader who understands his attributes, his competencies, his ability to influence, and the context that he is under. When you see an individual who is the leader of a nation, understanding what he has to do to collaborate and cooperate with alliances, how he not only has to mix his time spent with upper echelons, his supporters, with lower echelons. There was a picture of President Zelensky going through several hospitals in the Kherson district, or Kherson Oblast, where he was awarding medals to Ukrainian soldiers for their wounds in combat. He is on the front lines. He is talking and communicating with his people every day. So you have a president who understands the dynamics of leadership, where he must be, what he must do, how he must communicate, and how he must reflect a vision for the future. You see just the opposite from President Putin. He is a pariah right now on the world stage. He is telling lies to his people as part of his communications. He did not have a solid action plan for his military or his government. So it is literally night and day. A view that their operations in Ukraine would mirror what the United States did in Desert Storm. Multiple day operation as opposed to months in the making. And unfortunately, President Putin did not prepare his military and was not understanding the state of his military or his government to accomplish that mission.